Hello and welcome to Verbal to Visual. I'm your host, Doug Neill, and I recently worked with the folks at Mighty Networks to create a video all about their approach to community design. I will link to that video below, so do go check that video out and then come back here to see how I made it. The first thing that I wanted to chat about was how I got this project in the first place. For anyone who's starting to explore doing some freelance work using your sketchnoting skills, the first question is how to go about getting gigs. And the most important thing that I can share here maybe is simply putting your work out there is a great way to open the door for requests maybe coming in. I've heard that story many times within Verbal to Visual. Folks who are just sharing their sketch notes on Twitter and then getting DMs asking how much they charge to sketchnote their thing. In this case, though, I kind of had a relationship with Mighty Networks already. First of all, because I use their platform for my courses and community, and I also went through their Community Design Accelerator program, an online course, when I was making the transfer from my old setup over to Mighty Networks. I participated fairly actively in that course, and then I also shared a video here about how I sketchnoted that course. I'll link to that video as well, and even though that's largely about my sketchnoting process, how I sketchnoted and participated in an online course, I do talk about community design concepts within that video, and it ended up being the case that folks who were starting to explore Mighty Networks, maybe those who already were hosts and were getting their own networks going, they found that video and found it helpful and mentioned that to the folks at Mighty Networks. So since some hosts were already finding that type of video useful, they reached out to me to say, hey, why don't you make kind of a dedicated sketchnote video about community design for the Mighty Networks YouTube channel. So that's how the request came my way. And what I want to share next is why I actually said yes. Because for the past handful of years, I've actually declined any freelance work that's come my way because I wanted to focus on the building of sketchnoting resources, the things that I share here on this channel and within Verbal to Visual. When this request came in, though, it was kind of the perfect timing and the right alignment. I felt recently a desire to do more collaborating with others. As much as I enjoy doing my own sketchnoting work, connected to the books I read and podcasts I listen to, there's something exciting and engaging about creating a sketchnote for someone else and how that collaboration can bring new energy and also kind of push my skills more so than if I were just doing the work for myself. So that desire for collaboration was one reason I said yes. And from a timing perspective, it happened to align with a workshop series that I was hosting within Verbal to Visual about creating a sketchnoting side hustle. Since these types of gigs are already coming up fairly organically for some sketchnoters, I wanted to create a resource to help folks kind of navigate how to go about that process of doing paid work for someone else. So this video project was a great case study for me to participate in while I'm starting to create some educational resources for others who want to go down that path. And I think a third reason that I said yes is because I'm looking to develop an income source that's separate from Verbal to Visual. This place will always be my focus. It's where I'll put the most of my energy, but diversifying my income streams is important to me. And doing sketchnoting work for others is a great way to do that. That also creates a pretty nice feedback loop for all of the things that I'm doing within Verbal to Visual. So for all of those reasons, I said, yes, let's do it. Let's make this video. So now let's talk about the actual development process. Let me start with this workflow diagram that is one part of this kind of one-page service description that I created for the course, Sketchnoting Side Hustle, as an example of how you might present your services to others. The first step here, we'll start by getting clear on the message you'd like to share. For this video, the folks at Mighty Networks wanted to share their approach to community design and some of the highlights and biggest takeaways from their course on community design, with the hope that that would be a good entryway for folks to get a sense for what community design is and how Mighty Networks approaches that topic. And for those who align with that approach, this video might cause them to sign up for the Community Design Accelerator program and use Mighty Networks as a place to host their community. So this video fits solidly within that content marketing category. It's a useful standalone video that provides some value, teaches you something, but then can also be a gateway into engaging further with that company. And what Mighty Networks sent me was essentially just a really rough outline design, the main topics to explore, and then a few key points within each of those sections to make sure that I address. And from there, they handed it over to me to work on the script and the visuals. Now, with some of my videos, there's often a back and forth between writing the script and developing the visuals. For many of the videos that I make on this channel, I don't even write a script. I just develop the visuals and then improvise the narration. But for this type of video, making sure that I'm precise with the language and hit all the points makes sense to have a fully written script. So that's what I started with, the writing of that script. Occasionally, if ideas about visuals came up, I'd jot those down, but mostly it was a writing process first. And when it comes to feedback and refinement, I chose to send over a draft of the introduction first, the first of 7 sections of the video, just to make sure that kind of the style and tone were in alignment with what they were imagining. And one of the things that I enjoyed about making this video is that I got to write it from my perspective. There was some conversation at first about, well, is the voice going to be we at Mighty Networks approach community design in this way? Or is it I, Doug Neill, learned these things from this course and I wanted to share them with you? We kind of decided that the latter would be a bit more authentic and more natural for me to be sharing the ideas as myself, as a host on Mighty Networks and someone who went through the Community Design Accelerator program. And that made it a pretty natural writing process for me. So once I got good feedback on the introduction, I went and wrote the rest of it, sent that full script over, got that okayed with a few small adjustments. And then with that full written script ready, that's when I hopped into developing the visuals. And here I will share with you my concepts canvas. That's the app that I use to draft all the visuals, and that's also where I recorded them. So at first it was just about getting a sense for, okay, there's going to be 7 different sections here, 5 parts of community design, an intro up top, a closing after that. And at first I kind of just haphazardly captured some ideas about what that initial frame would look like. But then I decided to create a nice big grid of empty rectangles. So many of these are full now, but I started with just a big grid of blank ones just to give me lots of spaces to experiment with what that video frame would look like. So these are just 16 by 9 rectangles, the size of a YouTube video. I created them within Concepts just by using the kind of artboard size of 1080p, kind of traced that once and then just copy and pasted a bunch of them. And that made it easy to do a lot of experimentation and not get caught up with kind of just trying to get it right within the single frame available to me. And even within the intro part, talking about what community design is, experimenting with different visuals, maybe a tree visual, maybe getting everybody on the same bus. I ended up going with this type of visual here. As you can see, as I was experimenting, once I got a bunch of ideas down, I just used a kind of highlighter to say, okay, this is my favorite for this section, using the primary image of a star when talking about your big purpose, kind of this path visual for a year in the life of your community, calendar for the community design plan, kind of developed this ticket and box design for structure and pricing. I also experimented with kind of a pass and door analogy there, but I like the ticket and box one better. Rocket ship for launching and growing. And then for the closing section where they kind of talk about the history of community design, I experimented with a lot of different kind of arrow-oriented approaches, even some teaching visuals with a flip chart there, some brick building, but then ended on kind of a fairly simpler approach here of a person teaching, some kind of recurring icons from previous slides about the big ideas of community design, a couple of course participants sharing those ideas, and that felt like a good fit for the closing section. So once I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted each frame of the video to look like, I pulled all of those frames over and created kind of a new column for myself where the first column is all of those drafts. The second column here is where I kind of polished them up. I used that same initial structure, but actually tried to write and draw clearly. Here, pretty much just using black and white, a little bit of gray, a little bit of highlighting, but mostly just getting the ideas down. And it was these visuals here, these were the first ones that I sent over to the folks at Mighty Network for feedback. They liked how these looked, so the next question then was, okay, what about color? How might we make these pop a little bit? And for that, I pulled in a few of the brand colors for Mighty Networks, added them to a palette here within Concepts, and at first experimented just with changing the mark making color. So changing some of the text, some of the sketches to different colors, trying to kind of come up with a fairly consistent way of using 2 or 3. Here, I think I'm using 3 colors, the purple, the blue, and the red. Here I'm using 4. There was kind of an orangish color as well. These worked okay, but it wasn't quite enough pop. It didn't align as well as it could with kind of the Mighty Networks brand. So that's when I started playing around with adding color as a background and not just a mark making tool. And this is what we ended up landing on. And I think you can kind of see how much more that the examples on the right here pop compared to those on the left. And this was probably the biggest example of where my skills were kind of pushed to a new level or past my comfort zone, because typically I don't worry much about color. I don't mind stopping kind of at this stage right here. But there is something that is clearly more engaging when you add this type of color. And here I used 3 different colors, the red, the purple, and the blue, but with each I used them at 2 different opacity levels. Here, the background behind that who, that's the purple at 100% opacity, but then the background behind it, your ideal member, that's that same color, but at 50% opacity. Same with these 2 reds, 100% in the middle of the ticket, 50% on the outside there. I started doing that because I noticed that if everything was at that 100% opacity, that was almost just too much color. It was too overwhelming. So it was nice to add up 50% version to just have a little more balance to the overall page. So this set of visuals were the next that I sent over and got their approval as kind of the final visuals, the ones that we'll use for recording. And by the way, for each of these columns here, I didn't, as you can probably tell, I didn't redraw all of these things. I just copy and pasted and then played around with selecting different text, changing the color, and seeing what I liked. So even though like this looks like a lot of work right here, there is a lot of copying and pasting that led to it. And I did that one more time on this canvas here to add in some notes for myself when recording this. I use numbers like this just to remind myself the order in which I want to draw these elements, because that order is fairly tied to the script. When I was developing these visuals, I was going back and forth between working on the sketch itself and looking at the script to make sure that for each section of the script, there was kind of a corresponding visual and that it all built up in a way that made sense. I exported each of these as individual images that I pulled up on my computer to have as a reference while doing the recording on my iPad. And for that, I created a new canvas within Concepts here, just since this first canvas was getting full enough. I didn't want it to slow down while I was recording. And these here are the things that I sketched out while I was recording my iPad screen. In this case, I connected my iPad to my laptop and used the program OBS to do the recording, because I find that with my old iPad here, the built-in screen recorder sometimes drops some frames, and I did not want that to happen, so using OBS just has a little bit more consistency and quality to it. Now, if you're not looking side by side, these might look exactly like the reference images. There are slight differences, so these aren't quite perfect, and sometimes I got caught up on even kind of some spacing here, like ideally I would want this to be spaced something more like that. But those types of things that I consider to be slight imperfections, I allowed them to stay because they still work. And folks other than me probably wouldn't even notice them. So that's how I developed and then recorded the visuals for that video. I recorded the audio narration separately, brought all that together in Adobe Premiere Pro. If you want to learn more about that process, check out the course, How to Make Sketchnote Videos, and then sent that video off. One thing I will mention that I found to be helpful during that whole creation process, especially when I was developing the visuals, I found it helpful to have other resources on hand. Specifically, this book here by Willem and Brand, Visual Doing, Applying Visual Thinking in Your Day-to-Day Business. There's lots of great examples of sketchnoting, of visual thinking. So whenever I got stuck, when I wasn't sure what visual to make for a given video frame, or just wanted a little bit of inspiration to see some ideas that weren't the ones that I always use in my sketch notes, I just flipped through this and picked out visuals that felt appropriate and interesting to me. I also signed up for an online course not long ago on sketchnoting put on by the folks at Scriberia, whose work I've admired for a long time. That was another helpful thing to occasionally spend a little bit of time on, in between my creative work sessions working on this video. Balancing out that creation with some healthy consumption worked really well. So with the completion of that video, let's talk about potential impact. As I shared at the beginning, that video is now up on the Mighty Networks YouTube channel. My hope is that the folks who find it enjoy it, learn something from it, and then some percentage of those choose to interact with Mighty Networks on a deeper level than they would have otherwise. That's the sign of success for this project. If it helped folks realize, yeah, I do like the way Mighty Networks approaches community design. Maybe I'll sign up for the Community Design Accelerator program, and maybe I'll use Mighty Networks as a place to host my community and courses. We also approach the development of that video with longevity in mind. The hope being that, yes, that video is relevant right now, but that it will maintain its relevance in the years to come. Time will tell if we achieved that particular goal, and I look forward to hearing from Mighty Networks about that impact. And as I look to the future and think about doing this type of work again, it is something that I'd like to do more of. I don't think I ever want to work on more than one video project at a time, and I always want there to be a fairly long development process, at least a month long, because of the other commitments that I have. The work that I'm doing regularly here within Verbal to Visual, and also responsibilities I have as a new parent. This project also helped me clarify my thoughts around pricing. With this type of video, it's typical to charge per minute of final video. My starting point, what I put on that one-page service description, was a rate of $500 per minute of final video. With this work I just did, I think I recognized two different types of videos, two different types of services I might provide. The first being someone who maybe already has audio and just wants me to create some sketches to go along with it. For that type of video, I think I'd stick around that $500 per minute rate. But if I am the one actively doing the scripting and recording the narration, I think I'd want a higher rate for that type of video. Maybe $750 per minute or $1,000 per minute. And with something like pricing, there's always experimentation to be had. Deciding on a rate as a starting point. If a few potential clients in a row accept those rates, maybe you can bump them up next time. If there's a lot of pushback, maybe you move them down a little bit. But over time, you can fine tune those rates and hopefully over time increase them. So as I look toward 2022, I plan to take on more freelance projects like this. I'll be fairly picky. I want there to be lots of alignment. I personally want to be interested in whatever topic I'm sketchnoting. It doesn't have to be quite as much alignment as there was with this Mighty Networks video, but I am excited to see what might come my way. And I hope that sharing my process, what it all looked like, a bit about the tools I use, I hope that was helpful for you if you're also thinking about offering your services as a sketchnoter. If you want to dive deeper into this topic, do check out Sketchnoting Side Hustle. You can get access to that course and all of our courses, plus all of the ongoing weekly things by becoming a member of Verbal to Visual. As I mentioned in that community design video, with just a single subscription, you get access to everything. And you'll get to see all of those community design principles in action. You can learn more and sign up at verbaltovisual.com. Thank you so much for watching. Looking forward to sharing more ideas with you next time. Till then.